Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. The workshop lecture of week 7, the final steps in the course, and I'm very pleased that Ms. Mosquera Valderrama will join us after 1 o'clock to do exactly what I'm planning to do, being to recap the earlier weeks. Yes. And as promised in the course description, I also add one more substantive topic to the discussion. So today, the topic 7b, the nexus between development and women, 50% of world population, and more in particularly the phenomena of microfinance. And what I also do in this slide is providing you with the slides of an esteemed former colleague, Ms. Hermine Hayes-Klein, who developed and taught this course with me in previous years. And she did a chapter, and part of the reading in your reader is covering that on women and development more in general. But that will not be part of the exam requirements, because we do not manage to put that on your radar and devote enough time to that. But I like those slides. They're rather descriptive, all kinds of citations. And I think, as part of the outlook, the future orientation in this course, that the slides of Ms. Hayes-Klein cannot, should not miss. And the topic of today, and the slides of Ms. Hayes-Klein are also a window to an advanced course you will all take in year 4 called Law and Ethics. In Law and Ethics, in a systematic way, so the science of philosophy of right and wrong, also known as ethics, you will view and review the choices made in law. And if anything is dominant in this course, are all those choices made by states, economies, stakeholders, ecosystems, actors, and the like, pertaining to something you could label right or wrong. Poverty, wrong. Bad chances in your career, wrong. Low education, wrong. And so there are many normative statements in this course, as opposed to that you would say, well, it's everybody's own responsibility to be successful in life. And that could be another ethical view on all the topics in this course. And that is not the approach taken. The last 60 years, 70 years, starting with Marshall and all subsequent steps, there is this ethical tone that it is incorrect, it's wrong, that there are these differences in wealth, poverty, and so forth. And we will look at the exam preparation. Well, each course or each week I showed you this map. Remember to change your perspective maybe once in a while, or definitely. That is up to you. The intended learning outcomes, and let's see whether we hit them all after today, are that you are able to write on the current status quo of development of countries. So we take the country level as an important measure stick. Countries as in the economy of a country, the wealth of a country, or the amount of poor people in a country. And that is also triggered by the fact that in public international law it is countries that talk to each other. States. In PIL terms. So this class is not about what can an individual do to develop him or herself. That is in other courses on learning, pedagogic, or other types of things. So this is how a collective, a community, a society can collectively take steps, arrange things in terms of legal norms and so forth, to alleviate poverty. The learning goal includes the specific decision-making processes, both on United Nations level, producing soft law, on the state-to-state level, producing treaties, on the EU level, producing guidelines for investments abroad, and official development assistance. And decision-making processes, or at least the results, on project level, on the level of how do we create a dam, a hydroelectric dam, to produce electricity with the proceeds of which we can develop a country. And the decision-making as in, okay, so how many legal persons do we need, how many contracts do we need, and who should sign where, and these types of practicalities symbolized by the few case studies we did. And then, last but not least, the dispute settlement mechanisms. So if parties to, after they make decisions about how they want to relate to each other, if there's a misunderstanding, interpretation issues, non-performance, how is that then addressed in the classical sense of dispute settlement as part of our profession? And then, last but not least, there was the, no, not last but not least, the contributions of Ms. Mosquera were how is taxation interfering and playing a role in this picture? What is the role, the tool of, and the purpose of taxation in this whole picture? And then a little bit on the side, we addressed, let's say, other public goods as in environment, child labor, human rights, and the like. So that is sort of the integration of a few other courses. But the focus, I guess, was on the development. And then you could phrase it as, but not development on the expense of public goods. And that's sort of the underlying thing, where other courses, other perspectives are more articulated about the environment. And then the environment is the starting point of the reasoning. How do we protect the environment? Full stop. Or human rights. How do we protect human rights? Full stop.
But development does not equal economic progress directly, though, right? Because that would be too narrow of a definition.
Yeah, so we were not very active in trying to give you the ultimate definition of development, but it includes economic progress. It includes that in comparison to other economies, you could say that the economy functions, that it is connected to the world economy, as in that there's something to export.
Yeah, but sometimes that's something detrimental to the economy. The trade liberalization.
Yes. So the perspective taken in this course is the sort of economic circle. We will look at that drawing right away, because that is a good point. So what we basically did in this course is we say, in theory, development should be produced by these economic activities. As a consequence, you could harm public good. And one of the deeper truths, but not necessarily the learning outcome of this course, is that some claim that this whole drawing and this whole theory is detrimental for public good. And the approach taken, and let me see whether I say it correctly, is that that might be true, but if many stakeholders on the globe, including your future employers, are still in the circle, then at least higher education should include that you understand the process, so that you understand your colleagues and your boss. Other courses, and advanced courses in year 3, and internships in year 4, and or thesis could then challenge the circle, and I invite you to do so. But when I talk about the intended learning outcomes, it's probably fair to say that partly we talked about how does it work in the first place. And then you can understand the critique that. Okay. But before we are there, let me see whether I ticked all the learning outcomes. And then today we will look at another alternative to this big machinery of the Bretton Woods institutions, big loans, paperwork, and the like. Keyword, microfinance. And the recap after that is then these questions, and I will repeat them. Okay, these are then the slides of Ms. Heers-Klein. So I would suggest that in your exam preparation, you, or maybe after that, you check it with Mr. Gandhi on civilization and women, and the fact that 100 million women are missing in China and the like. No? So after the exam.
So women developments after the exam.
But we will talk about microfinance right away. Mr. Yunus, on the slide, did a wonderful thing by inventing something. And he invented microfinance. And then I hope, because I forgot my copy, that someone is having the text and material in the bag as we speak in this room. May I borrow it? Because I think his book Banker to the Poor, chapter 4, is explaining the essence of microfinance and development as such. So let me read it to you quickly. In 1976, I began visiting the poorest households in Jobra to see if I could help them directly in any way. And the I person is Mr. Yunus, who in Bangladesh was is a professor in economics. He was educating people like you how economics work, with those circles and so forth. There were 3 parts to the village: a Muslim, a Hindu, and a Buddhist section. When I visited the Buddhist section, I would often take one of my students, a native of the Buddhist section, along with me. One day, as Latifi, that's one of those colleagues, and I were making our rounds in Jobra, this village, we stopped at a rundown house with crumbling mud walls and a low-thatched roof pocked with holes. We made our way through a crowd of scavenging chickens and beds of vegetables to the front of the house. A woman scattered on the dirt floor of the veranda, a half-finished bamboo stool gripped between her knees. So she was making a bamboo stool. Her fingers moved quickly, plaiting the stubborn strands of cane. She was totally absorbed in her work. On hearing Latifi's call of greeting, she dropped her bamboo, sprang to her feet, and scurried into the house. "Don't be afraid," Latifa called out. "We are not strangers. We teach up at the university. We are neighbors. We want to ask you a few questions, that is all." Reassured by Latifi's gentle manner, she answered in a low voice, "There's nobody home." She meant there was no male at home. In Bangladesh, women are not supposed to talk to men who are not close relatives. Children were running around, naked in the yard. Neighbors peered out at us from their windows, wondering what we were doing. In the Muslim sections of Yobra, we often had to talk to women through the bamboo walls or curtains. The custom of purda, literally curtain or veil, kept married Muslim women in a state of virtual seclusion from the outside world. It was strictly observed in Chittagong district, it's the area in Bangladesh. As I am a native of Chittagong district, I speak the local dialect, Yunus talking. I would try to gain the confidence of Muslim women by chatting. Complimenting a mother on her baby was a natural way to put her at ease. I now picked up one of the naked children beside me, but he started to cry and rushed over to his mother. She let him climb into her arms. "How many children do you have?" Latifi asked her. "3," was the answer. "He's very beautiful, this one," I said. Slightly reassured, the mother came to the doorway, holding her baby. She was in her early 20s, thin, with dark skin and black eyes. She wore a red sari and had the tired eyes of a woman who labored every day from morning to night. "What's your name?" I asked. "Sophia." "How old are you?" 21. I did not use a pen and notepad, for that would have scared her off. Later, I only allowed my students to take notes on return visits. Do you own this bamboo?" I asked. That's a critical question. Mr. Yunus asked the lady, "Do you own the bamboo?" And she said, "Yes." "How do you get it?" "I buy it." "How much does the bamboo cost you?" 22 cents. "Do you have 22 cents?" "No, I borrow it from the piecars, the middlemen. What is your arrangement with them?" So Sophia borrows 22 cents from, 22 cents from the piecars, the middlemen. And then the next critical question is, what is your arrangement between Sophia and the middleman, local money lender? And then the answer is, I, Sophia, must sell my bamboo stools back to them at the end of the day as repayment for my loan. And then, critically, from an economic perspective, how much do you sell a stool for? And then she says, because it's a local currency, 50 tak and 50 poshe, so you make profit, so it boils down that she makes 2 cents profit. So the 20 cents, she makes 2 cents profit. And then Mr. Yunus continues asking questions. And could you borrow the cash from the moneylender and buy your own raw material? Yes, but the moneylender would demand a lot. People who deal with them only get poorer. And so you have the piecars, so those are middlemen. And then you have moneylenders, so the bigger fish. But if you borrow money from real moneylenders, then you'll get only poorer in the eyes of Sophie. How much does the moneylender charge? It depends. Well, then they have a whole discussion on how that moneylenders work, and basically she says, well, I have to stick to the middleman. And that is all you earn from making these beautiful bamboo stools, 2 cents. Her answer is yes. Sophia did not want to waste any more time talking. I watched as she set to work again, her small brown hands plaiting the strands of bamboo as they had every day for months and years on end. This was her livelihood. She sweated barefoot on the hard mud. Her fingers were calloused, her nails black with grime. How would her children, Mr. Yunus asked himself, break the circle of poverty she had started? How could they go to school when the income Sophia earned was barely enough to feed her, let alone shelter her family and clothe them properly? It seemed hopeless to imagine that her babies would one day escape this misery. Sophia earned 2 cents a day. It was this knowledge that shocked me. In my university courses, I theorized about sums in the millions of dollars. But here, before my eyes, the problem of life and death were posed in terms of pennies. Something was wrong. Why did my university courses not reflect the reality of Sophia's life? I was angry at myself, angry at my economic departments, and the thousands of intelligent professors who had not tried to address this problem and solve it. It seemed to me the existing economic system made it absolutely certain that Sophia's income would be kept perpetually at such a low level that she would never save a penny and would never invest in expanding her economic base. Two keywords: with 2 cents a day, you're not able to save any of those two. You needed to eat, and let alone that you can invest. In the recipe talking, mobilizing domestic sources. Her children were condemned to live a life of penury, of hand-to-mouth survival, just as she had lived it before them, and as her parents did before her. I had never heard of anyone suffering for the lack of 22 cents. So the total investment in one stool or 1 day work is 22 cents. It seems impossible to me, preposterous. Should I reach into my pocket and hand Sophia the pittance she needed for capital? That would be so simple, so easy. I resisted the urge to give Sophia the money she needed. She was not asking for charity, and giving one person 22 cents was not addressing the problem on any permanent basis. Latifi, the colleague, and I drove back up the hill to my house. I was trying to see Sophia's problem from her point of view. She suffered because the cost of the bamboo was 5 taka, so 22 cents. She did not have the cash necessary to buy her raw materials. As a result, she could survive only in a tight cycle, borrowing from the trader and selling back to him. Her life was a form of bonded labor or slavery. The trader made certain that he paid Sophia a price that barely covered the cost of the material and was just enough to keep her alive. She could not break free of her exploitative relationship with him. To survive, she needed to keep working through the trader. That is what Mr. Marshall in his speech said, that you have to break the vicious circle. So if on a daily basis this is what you do, you cannot break that circle. You cannot sit down for 1 day and think, okay, what shall I do next? Because then you do not earn 2 cents and you die. So it's a vicious circle, which he calls sort of bonded labor. Usurious rates have become so standardized and socially accepted in third world countries that the borrower rarely realizes how oppressive a contract is. So he analyzes them. The next day, a little further, I called in Begu, a university student who collected data for me, and asked her to help me make a list of people in Jobera, like Sophia, who were dependent on traders. Within 1 week, we had a list prepared. It named 42 people who borrowed a total of $27. So 42 Sophias were in the same vicious circle, and together they needed on a daily basis $27. They earned that, so that's then on a daily basis their little economy. My God, all this misery in all those families, all for the lack of $27. And then he took it on village level. The students stood there without saying a word. We were both sickened by the reality of it all. It was all so easy. I handed my mother the $27 and told her, here, lend this money to the 42 villagers on our list. They can repay the traders when they owe them and sell their products at a good price. When should they repay you? The student asked. Whenever they can, I said. And so for university professors in Bangladesh, $27 is as much as for you. You know, that's sort of a night in the beach bar. Alright, so not a big deal. So he said, okay, let's give the whole group 27 months.